Before you scroll, pause for a second because this message did not reach you by accident. Something has already started moving behind the scenes and your name was part of a conversation you never heard. No warning, no setup, no sign that anything unusual was about to happen. And yet in a quiet moment, your person suddenly opened up about you in a way no one expected. What they said was not casual. It was not thrown out like small talk. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere they had tried to keep hidden for longer than anyone knew. Listen closely, because this gets stronger. The strange part is not only that they spoke about you, it is how everything changed when they did. Their voice softened. Their words slowed down. The room itself seemed to shift. At first it was just an ordinary conversation, the kind people forget by the next day. But then one simple question turned everything. Someone asked about the people who still matter when the noise fades, the people whose names return in silence, the ones who stay in the heart long after the moment has passed. There was a pause, a real one, the kind that says more than words ever could. And then, carefully, almost like they had been holding it back, your name entered the room. So stay with me, because what they shared next was deeper than anyone expected, and by the end of this, the meaning of that moment may hit harder than you think. What surprised everyone first was this. They did not talk about what you did. They talked about what you make them feel. That changed the entire tone. They tried to explain something that is hard to put into words, how some people leave a mark without even trying, how one presence can stay alive even in absence, how a person can appear in thought without warning and remain there longer than intended. They admitted that lately, ordinary moments have been interrupted by memories connected to you. A place, a sound, a passing sentence from someone else. Small things, simple things, but somehow each one leads back to you, and that honesty carried more power than anything dramatic ever could. They said there is something about you that does not fully fade, even when they try to focus elsewhere, even when life gets loud, even when the day pulls them in 10 different directions. Something still returns, quietly, repeatedly, in the smallest moments that no one else would notice. And while they were saying all this, the person listening saw something even more revealing. Every time they spoke about you, they softened. It showed in the way they slowed before saying your name again. It showed in the quick glance away, as if they were searching for words that still felt safe enough to release. Don't click away yet, because this matters more than it seems. Some feelings become difficult to admit for one reason only, because they are real. And once they are spoken, they can no longer hide behind silence. Then came a line that changed the energy of the whole conversation. They said they never expected one person to stay on their mind for this long. It did not sound dramatic. That is exactly why it landed so hard. There was no performance in it, no attempt to impress anyone, just truth showing up when their guard got tired. And once that truth began, it kept moving. They started talking about little moments they still remember clearly, small details tied to you that somehow remained untouched by time. A certain tone in your voice, a way you answered once, a calm energy that stayed stronger in memory than louder moments from other people ever did. Think about that. People do not remember details like that unless something inside them decided those details mattered. They spoke as if they had only recently realized how much your presence really meant. Then someone asked them directly, "Why are you saying this now?" There was another pause, a longer one, a heavier one, and finally the answer came. Sometimes distance makes hidden thoughts louder. That one sentence opened everything, because it is true. When the noise drops, truth becomes easier to hear. They admitted there were moments they almost reached out, moments they almost said more, moments they nearly let honesty come sooner, but something held them back. Not because the feeling disappeared, not because the thought was gone, but because they did not know if the timing would understand their heart. Stay with this, because the next part carries real weight, and what they revealed after that felt less like memory and more like something still alive. They said your name has felt different lately inside their mind, stronger, clearer, harder to dismiss. That alone tells you something shifted. People do not speak this way unless they have crossed a quiet line inside themselves. Then they shared something that no one expected at all. They admitted they have been replaying one specific memory involving you more than once. One moment, one scene, one unfinished piece that still seems to breathe inside them. They did not give every detail. They protected it. and that protection said everything. When someone guards a memory carefully, it still means something deep, not something dead, not something random, something living. Then the person listening asked if they believe some people return for a reason. Again, silence. And then very softly they answered that some connections do not disappear even when life gets busy. That line did not sound casual, it sounded lived. They admitted they tried not to think too deeply before, but lately that has become harder than they expected. Something keeps returning, not loudly, but enough to make them wonder whether certain thoughts were never meant to leave at all. And perhaps the most surprising thing they said was this: they are starting to wonder if what they once ignored now deserves real attention. That changed the whole room, because once a quiet truth starts asking for attention, it usually does not go back to sleep. So listen carefully, because what follows is where the conversation moved from memory into meaning, and the deeper it went, the less they seemed able to pretend these feelings were small. They described you as someone whose value became clear late, not right away, and that happens more often than people admit. Some people are loud and easy to notice, but they pass through life quickly and leave almost nothing behind. Others are quiet, but unforgettable. Their meaning shows up later, after silence, after distance, after reflection. That is how they described you. And while they were saying it, something subtle happened. They smiled without meaning to. Not a big smile, not a staged one. Just the kind that arrives when memory touches something genuine before control can step in. That kind of moment cannot be forced. It appears when feeling gets there first. Then, almost under their breath, they said something so soft it nearly disappeared. Some people enter your life quietly, but stay louder than many who arrive with noise. Everyone heard it. No one forgot it. And after saying that, they went quiet again, almost like they had already revealed more than they planned to. But even that silence was speaking, because sometimes the deepest truth comes out only once, briefly, before the heart remembers to hide again. And what they shared about you was not empty admiration. It was not passing curiosity. It was not casual memory. It was the kind of honesty that rises only when someone can no longer pretend certain feelings are small. So if this message found you, understand this part clearly. Your name has carried unusual weight somewhere you cannot see. Your presence entered a conversation you never witnessed. And what was said about you was softer, deeper, and far more revealing than anyone expected. Stay to the end, because this was not the end of that conversation. In a strange way, it felt like only the beginning. What happened next was even more unexpected, because after your name was spoken openly, something in them seemed to change. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full of thoughts they were still trying to arrange, full of feelings they had just allowed into the light. They did not rush to another topic. They stayed there, almost like they were surprised by how much had already slipped out. Then someone asked them carefully, "So why does this still matter to you now?" They could have answered lightly, they could have laughed it off. But they did not. They said lately there has been a strange feeling they cannot explain, like thoughts about you arrive without permission, especially in the quiet hours when everything else slows down. Not once, not rarely, again and again. They described how normal moments suddenly become tied to you without warning. A phrase someone says, a memory that passes through, a face in a crowd that reminds them of something unfinished. And each time it happens, they feel that same pause inside. That pause matters because people only pause for what touches deeper than expected. Then they admitted there are things they never said when they had the chance. Not because they had no words, but because the timing felt uncertain and their emotions were harder to name than they looked from the outside. And then came a sentence no one in that room saw coming. Sometimes silence protects feelings until those feelings become too clear to hide. Listen to that again, because that was not imagination speaking. That was experience. That was truth finding its own voice. When someone asked if they regretted not saying more earlier, they did not answer right away. That hesitation said enough. Then slowly they admitted there are moments they replay in their mind and wonder whether certain chances should have been held more carefully. That is where the conversation became unforgettable. They mentioned one detail about you that still stays vivid: your calm way of speaking when others expected noise, your ability to leave an impression without trying too hard, the kind of presence that does not ask for attention but receives it anyway. They said that quality is rare, very rare, because many people are noticed quickly and forgotten just as quickly, but some people are understood slowly and remembered for a long time. Then came a line hidden inside simple words, but it sounded almost like a confession, They recently realized that not everyone can create peace just by being remembered, but somehow thoughts connected to you carry exactly that feeling. The person listening was surprised because no one says something like that casually. It comes from a place that is real. Then they were asked, "Do you think they know any of this?" They gave a small smile and said no, and maybe that is why it still feels unfinished. That single word, unfinished, changed everything, because unfinished feelings stay alive in a different way. They keep breathing in the background. They keep returning when life gets quiet. They keep asking for attention without making a sound. So don't skip now, because what came next reached even deeper, and by that point it was clear this was no longer just a conversation. It was a quiet confession unfolding in real time. They said there are times they almost reach out in their mind before stopping themselves, moments when your name rises unexpectedly, and they wonder whether some connections stay present even when no words are exchanged. That is not ordinary memory, that is emotional presence. And emotional presence does not vanish just because time passes. Then they shared something even more honest. They said there is a difference between forgetting someone and becoming quiet about them. That line changed the room. Because silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence means the feeling became too meaningful to speak carelessly. One person then asked, "When did you first realize this really mattered?" Their answer came softly, "When I noticed even small things remind me." That reply carried more truth than they likely meant to reveal. Small reminders are powerful because they arrive naturally. No effort, no searching. Just sudden memory stepping into the moment on its own. A place, a song, a sentence, a still afternoon, and suddenly your presence appears again. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. And honesty always reaches deeper than theatre. Near the end of that part of the conversation, they quietly said something that stayed in the room long after the words were gone. Some people stay important even when life becomes crowded. That needed no explanation. Everyone understood it. Importance that survives distraction is real. Importance that remains after time passes is rare. And after they said it, there was another silence. But this one felt different, not uncertain, not uncomfortable. It felt like someone had finally allowed truth to breathe. And maybe the most surprising part of all was this. After speaking openly, they seemed lighter, as if saying your name honestly had lifted something they had been carrying in private. Stay here, because once truth begins to speak, it usually does not stop with one moment. And that is exactly what happened. The conversation did not end where people thought it would. After a brief pause, they returned to your name again without anyone asking them to. That mattered, because when someone circles back to the same person after the subject could have already passed, it means the thought was never finished inside them. They leaned forward slightly and spoke more quietly, almost as if the next words were not meant for everyone, yet they still came out clearly enough to change the whole mood. They admitted that lately there has been a growing sense that something connected to you has remained unfinished in their heart. Even though they tried for a long time to convince themselves life had already moved on, that quiet confession revealed something deeper. Unfinished feelings do not return unless they still carry meaning. Then they began describing how certain memories involving you have stayed unusually sharp. Not dramatic memories, not big scenes, not big, small ones. The quiet kind people usually forget. A look, a short sentence, a tiny moment where nothing major happened, and still it remained untouched by time. That is important, because hearts do not protect small details unless those details hold real value. They said lately those memories have come back with strange clarity, almost as if something inside them has been asking them to look again at what they once overlooked. When someone asked why now, the answer came slowly. Because some things only become clear after distance. That line carried a lot. Distance removes noise. Distance strips away confusion. Distance often reveals what mattered quietly all along. So listen closely, because after that, the conversation moved from remembering you to recognizing what your absence has truly meant, and the difference between those two things is everything. They admitted there were times they tried to replace those thoughts with distractions, but every time life became quiet again, the same reflection returned. Your presence had left a deeper mark than they had allowed themselves to admit. That is not simple remembrance. That is recognition, arriving late, but arriving strong. Then they described you as someone whose energy stayed calm in memory even while everything else in life became complicated. Not everyone receives that kind of description. Many names fade when pressure builds. Many impressions blur with time. But yours, they said, stayed clear. Clear enough that even now, in recent days, your name still carries that same quiet weight. Someone asked if they had ever nearly sent a message. There was an instant pause, so obvious that everyone already knew the answer. Then, with a small smile, they admitted there had been more than one moment when they almost did, but stopped because they did not know how that honesty would be received. That matters. Because thought had already started moving toward action, even if it never fully arrived. And delayed feelings often grow stronger because they stay unspoken too long. They explained that the strongest thoughts tend to arrive at unexpected hours, late at night, in slow mornings, in ordinary afternoons when nothing dramatic is happening, and suddenly your name appears again as if it belongs in the center of their attention. Then came the question no one expected: do you think this connection ever truly left? The answer was almost a whisper. No, I think it only became silent. That sentence changed the meaning of everything, because silence is not disappearance. Silence often means the feeling has moved deeper, and when it moves deeper, it becomes harder to deny. So stay with me, because what followed was one of the clearest truths they had spoken all night. They said they recently heard a small phrase from someone else, and it instantly reminded them of you. What surprised them was not the memory itself, but how quickly the emotion returned with it. That kind of response cannot be forced. It only happens when something inside still answers naturally. Then they added a line no one forgot. Some people leave quietly, but they do not leave empty space. Everyone knew that was about you, because empty space means absence, but meaningful people leave presence behind, even when they are far away. Then the conversation turned toward timing. They said maybe some truths are only understood after enough time passes for pride, confusion, and fear to become weaker than honesty. That sentence revealed growth, real growth. Because honesty usually comes when someone gets tired of hiding from what they already know. And what they now seem to know is simple, even if it took time to admit. Your impact did not disappear. Your memory did not fade. Your name still carries feeling. Near the very end, they looked down for a second and said something that sounded like it was meant for themselves as much as for anyone listening. Some people are remembered because of what happened. Others are remembered because of how they made you feel. That stayed in the air long after they finished, because events fade, feelings do not. And if they linked your name to feeling, not memory alone, then something is still alive beneath the surface. So if you are still here, listen to this next part carefully, because the final reflection they gave was the deepest of all, and it explains why your name remained in that conversation long after anyone thought it would. They said there are certain people whose presence becomes clearer only after silence creates enough space to understand them properly. Every word was slow and careful, as if they had tested it many times in their own mind before finally letting it out. Then they added something even more striking. Sometimes you only realize the value of someone when normal days start to feel incomplete without thoughts of them appearing out of nowhere. That changed everything again, because ordinary days reveal truth better than emotional moments do. If someone enters your mind in the middle of a normal hour, without invitation, without effort, without any clear reason, then the connection is real. They went on to explain that recently there have been moments when other people are speaking, but their own thoughts drift somewhere else entirely, and somehow those drifting thoughts keep returning to memories tied to you. A face remembered, a tone remembered, a feeling remembered, not forced, not chosen, just there. When someone asked what exactly stays with them, they hesitated, not because they had no answer, but because some answers become hard when they are completely true. Finally, they said it was the feeling that something important was never fully understood while it was happening. That line held so much weight, because sometimes meaning arrives late, and when it does, it often arrives stronger. Then one final question came. If your name appeared in front of you again, what would happen? There was a long silence, and then softly they answered, I think I would listen more carefully this time. That was it. That was the shift. Not noise, not drama, just recognition, just honesty, just the quiet admission that what was once overlooked no longer feels small, and if truth has reached that point inside them, then this story may not be finished at all.